My name is Marcus Chen, and at 28, I've become an expert at avoiding mirrors. Not because I don't like what I see, though the hollow eyes and perpetually tired expression aren't exactly winning any prizes, but because mirrors reflect more than just your face. They show you who you used to be, and sometimes that's a person you're not ready to meet again. I live in Portland, Oregon, in a converted warehouse apartment that's too big for one person but somehow feels cramped anyway. The exposed brick walls and industrial fixtures looked cool when I signed the lease 2 years ago, back when I thought I might actually have friends over, maybe even date someone. Now they just echo my footsteps and remind me how empty the space is. I work as a freelance graphic designer, which sounds more glamorous than it actually is. Mostly I create logos for small businesses and design websites for people who think Comic Sans is a legitimate font choice. The work pays well enough to keep me in decent coffee and takeout, and it lets me work from home, which means I can go days without talking to another human being if I plan it right. That planning used to be accidental. Now it's intentional. 3 years, 4 months, and 16 days ago, I lost David. My partner, my best friend, the person who could make me laugh until my sides hurt and who knew exactly how I liked my eggs in the morning. We'd been together since college, 8 years of building a life that felt solid and real. We were talking about marriage, about buying a house with a yard for the dog we'd eventually get, about growing old together in matching rocking chairs. Then came the diagnosis. Stage 4 pancreatic cancer. The doctors gave him 6 months. He lasted 7, fighting every step of the way, and I held his hand through every treatment, every bad day, every moment of hope and despair. When he died, a part of me went with him. The part that knew how to connect with people, how to laugh without guilt, how to imagine a future that didn't feel like walking through quicksand. Today is December 15th, which means it's been exactly 3 years, 4 months, and 16 days. I know this because I've been marking time like a prisoner counting down a sentence I'm not sure will ever end. And like every year on this date, I find myself at Rosie's Diner on Southeast Division, the place David discovered during his last few months when hospital food became unbearable and he craved real comfort food. The diner is a throwback to the 1950s, all red vinyl booths and chrome fixtures, with a jukebox that plays Patsy Cline and Elvis if you feed it quarters. David loved it here, said it felt like stepping into a time when things were simpler, when a good burger and a milkshake could solve most problems. I come here every year on this day, order his favorite meal, cheeseburger, extra pickles, chocolate milkshake, and a slice of apple pie, and sit in the booth we always shared, pretending he's just in the bathroom and will slide in across from me any minute. It's pathetic, and I know it, but it's also the closest I get to feeling normal anymore. The diner is busier than usual for a Tuesday afternoon. The lunch crowd has thinned out, but there are still a few lingles scattered around, construction workers grabbing coffee, a elderly couple sharing a piece of cake at the counter. I take our usual booth in the corner, the one by the window that looks out onto the street where hipsters on fixed gear bikes dodge food trucks and tourists with cameras. I order the meal from Bethany, the waitress who's worked here longer than I've been coming. She's in her 50s, with bottle red hair and a voice roughened by decades of cigarettes she quit 5 years ago but still misses. She knows my story, not because I told her, but because she's observant in the way that good waitresses are, picking up on the details that matter. The usual, honey, she asks, and when I nod, she doesn't comment on the extra place setting I always request but never use. That's one of the things I appreciate about Bethany. She understands that some rituals don't need explanation. While I wait for the food, I pull out my phone and scroll through old photos of David. There's one from our last trip together, to the coast, where he's building a sandcastle despite being 31 years old and theoretically too dignified for such things. His hair was already thinning from the chemo, hidden under a Portland Timbers beanie, but his smile was genuine. That was 3 weeks before he couldn't leave the hospital anymore. I'm so lost in the photo that I almost don't notice when someone slides into the booth across from me. Excuse me, I start to say, looking up, but the words catch in my throat. The woman sitting across from me is probably in her late 30s, with shoulder-length auburn hair that's escaping from a messy bun and warm brown eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. She's wearing scrubs, the kind nurses wear, in a soft blue that brings out the color of her eyes. There's something both tired and vibrant about her face, like she's seen enough of the world to be weary but hasn't let it break her spirit. I'm sorry, she says, and her voice has a slight southern accent, soft around the edges like honey and tea. I know this is forward, but I've been watching you come here for the past 2 years, and you always sit alone, always order for 2 people, and I wondered if maybe you could use some company. I stare at her, my brain struggling to process this unexpected intrusion into my carefully maintained ritual. I'm sorry, but I think there's been a mistake, Marcus, right? She interrupts gently. Bethany mentioned your name once. I'm Drive, Sarah Lou. I work at OHSU, in the oncology department. She pauses, her expression softening. I eat here sometimes after my shifts, especially the really hard ones. And I've seen you here before, on this same date every year. You order the same meal, and you sit here for exactly 93 minutes before you pay and leave. Today you've been crying. I reach up instinctively and feel the wetness on my cheek that I hadn't even realized was there. I'm not, it's okay, she says quietly. Grief has its own schedule. Doesn't matter how long it's been. The word, grief, hangs between us like a bridge I'm not sure I want to cross. Most people avoid the word, dancing around it with euphemisms and platitudes. But she says it simply, matter-of-factly, like she's acknowledging the weather. Bethany appears with my order, the cheeseburger, milkshake, and pie arranged just like always, and raises an eyebrow when she sees Sarah. Well, I'll be damned, she mutters with what might be approval, then looks at Sarah. You want anything, hun? Just coffee, please, Sarah says. And maybe an extra fork for that pie. It looks too good not to share. After Bethany leaves, we sit in silence for a moment. I should tell this woman, Sarah, to leave, to find her own booth, to let me continue my pathetic annual tradition in peace. But something about her presence feels different from the usual intrusions into my solitude. She's not trying to fix me or cheer me up. She's just here, solid and calm, like she understands that sometimes the best thing you can do for someone is simply exist in the same space. You said you're an oncologist, I finally say, my voice rougher than I intended. She nods, stirring sugar into her coffee. Pediatric oncology, actually. Children's cancer. It's hard work, but it's what I'm meant to do. The irony isn't lost on me, sitting across from someone who fights the disease that took David. I should feel angry, or bitter, or something sharp and painful. Instead, I feel oddly curious. How do you do it? Deal with losing patients, I mean. Her expression grows thoughtful. You learn to carry it differently. The loss never gets easier, but you get stronger at bearing the weight. And you learn that every moment of connection matters, every small victory, every time you help someone feel less alone. It adds up. David, my partner, he died of pancreatic cancer 3 years ago, I hear myself saying, though I hadn't planned to share that information. The doctors at OHSU did everything they could, but it was already too advanced when they found it. Sarah's eyes fill with a compassion that's professional but also deeply personal. I'm sorry. Pancreatic it's one of the hardest ones. The survival rates are brutal, and it moves so fast. She pauses. What was he like? The question surprises me. Most people, when they learn about David, either change the subject quickly or offer generic condolences. But Sarah asks about him as a person, not just as a loss to be grieved. He was funny, I say, taking a small bite of the cheeseburger that suddenly tastes like cardboard. Like, genuinely funny, not just dad joke funny. He could find humor in anything, even during the worst of it. And he was stubborn, refused to let the cancer define him, kept working until the very end. He was a social worker, helped kids in foster care. Said if he was going to fight something, he wanted to make sure he was protecting people who needed it most. As I talk, I realize it's the first time in months, maybe longer, that I've described David as a whole person rather than just as an absence in my life. Sarah listens without interrupting, nodding at the right moments, her attention complete and focused. He sounds like he was remarkable, she says when I finish. The kind of person who makes the world better just by being in it. Yeah, he was. I push the food around on my plate, appetite gone. Which is why I can't figure out how to exist in a world that doesn't have him in it anymore. Sarah reaches across the table and gently touches my hand, not grabbing it, not trying to force connection, just a brief contact that somehow manages to be both professional and deeply human. The world still has the parts of him that you carry. His humor, his stubbornness, his love for you. Those things don't die when someone's body does. I look up at her, this stranger who somehow understands something about loss that my therapist and my well-meaning friends never quite captured. Are you speaking from experience? She pulls her hand back and wraps it around her coffee mug. My wife died 4 years ago. Car accident. She was coming home from her book club, and a drunk driver ran a red light. Her voice stays steady, but I can see the old pain flickering behind her eyes. Her name was Jennifer. Jenny. She was a high school English teacher, and she could quote Shakespeare from memory, and she made the world's best banana bread. The revelation hits me like a physical blow. Here I am, wallowing in my grief, talking to someone who's walked the same terrible path. I'm sorry, I say, and mean it. That's God, I can't imagine. It's different for everyone, Sarah says. But the isolation is universal. After Jenny died, I threw myself into work. 12-hour days, sometimes longer. I convinced myself that if I saved enough other people, it would somehow balance out losing her. Took me 2 years to realize I was just running from the grief, not processing it. What changed? She smiles, and it transforms her whole face. A patient's grandmother. This little girl, maybe 7 years old, with leukemia. Her grandmother sat with her every day during treatment, and one day she looked at me and said, "Doctor, you look like someone who's forgotten how to live." Just like that. And she was right. I find myself leaning forward, drawn into her story. What did you do? Started small. Joined a grief support group, which was terrible at first, all those people sitting in a circle sharing their pain like some kind of emotional potluck. But eventually I realized they weren't wallowing. They were healing, learning how to carry their love for the people they'd lost without being crushed by it. The food sits untouched between us as we talk. Outside the window, Portland goes about its business, cyclists and coffee shops and the eternal drizzle that defines the city. But inside this booth, in this bubble of shared understanding, I feel something I haven't felt in years, the possibility that maybe I'm not as alone as I thought. Can I ask you something? Sarah says after Bethany refills our coffee cups. What do you think David would say if he could see you now? Coming here every year, ordering his meal, sitting alone. The question stings because I know the answer immediately. He'd be pissed, I admit. David hated self-pity, even when he had every right to feel sorry for himself. He'd probably tell me to stop being an asshole and get on with living. Sarah laughs, not at me, but with recognition. Jenny would say something similar, though probably with more swearing. She had a mouth like a sailor when she got worked up. For the first time in longer than I can remember, I laugh too. Really laugh, not the polite chuckle I've perfected for social situations. It feels rusty, like an unused muscle, but also somehow familiar. Listen, Sarah says, glancing at her watch, I need to get back to the hospital soon, but I want to ask you something. There's a grief support group that meets at the community center on Thursdays. It's not the terrible circle of sadness thing I mentioned before, it's actually pretty good. Real people dealing with real loss, trying to figure out how to keep going. Would you consider coming? Just once, to see if it helps. Every instinct I have screams at me to say no, to thank her politely and return to my carefully constructed isolation. But there's something about Sarah, her directness, her understanding, the way she's managed to have this conversation without making me feel broken or pitied, that makes me consider possibilities I've spent 3 years avoiding. I don't know, I say honestly. I've gotten pretty good at being alone. I thought I had too, she replies. Turns out I was just good at being lonely. There's a difference. She pulls out a business card and writes something on the back. My personal number, she explains. If you decide you want to try the group, call me. I'll go with you the first time, if that would help. No pressure, no judgment if you decide you're not ready. She leaves money for her coffee and stands to go, then pauses. Marcus. Coming here every year, honoring David's memory, that's not pathetic. It's love. But love isn't supposed to be a prison. It's supposed to be a foundation for building something new. And then she's gone, leaving me alone with her words and a business card that feels heavier than it should in my hand. I sit in the booth for another 20 minutes, finishing the meal without really tasting it, thinking about what Sarah said. About the difference between being alone and being lonely. About love as a foundation rather than a chain. About the way she talked about Jenny, with sadness, yes, but also with warmth and even humor. Like her wife's death was a chapter in their story, not the end of the book. When I finally pay and leave, I slip Sarah's card into my wallet, next to the photo of David the first always carry. It feels like a small act of rebellion against the grief that's defined me for so long. That night, I do something I haven't done in months. I cook a real meal. Nothing fancy, just pasta with sauce from a jar and a salad, but I set the table for one person instead of two, and I eat it while watching a comedy special on Netflix instead of the documentaries about suffering that have become my usual entertainment. It's a small step, barely noticeable to anyone else. But it feels huge to me. For the next few days, I find myself thinking about Sarah. Not romantically, that part of me still feels sealed off, frozen in time with David, but with curiosity. I wonder what it would be like to sit in a room with other people who understand loss, to hear their stories and maybe, eventually, share my own. On Thursday morning, I almost call her 3 different times. Each time I dial the number and then hang up before it rings, telling myself I'm not ready, that I need more time, that maybe next week or next month would be better. But Thursday afternoon, I'm working on a logo design for a local bakery, and I find myself creating something different than my usual clean, corporate aesthetic. The design is warmer, more organic, with hand-lettered text and small illustrations that feel personal and inviting. It's the kind of design David would have loved. He was always encouraging me to take more creative risks, to put more of myself into my work. I stare at the design for a long time, and then, almost without conscious decision, I pick up my phone and call Sarah's number. She answers on the second ring. Dr. Lou. Hi, it's Marcus. From the diner. Marcus, I'm so glad you called. How are you doing? I think I'd like to try the group. If the offer still stands. Of course it does. We meet tonight at 7, at the East Side Community Center on Stark Street. Do you want me to meet you there? I take a deep breath. Yeah, that would be good. Thank you. Thank you for calling. It takes courage to reach out, Marcus. David would be proud of you. The words hit me unexpectedly hard, not because they hurt but because they feel true. The East Side Community Center is a low-slung brick building that's seen better days, with fluorescent lighting and the kind of industrial carpet that was probably installed sometime in the 1970s. Sarah is waiting for me in the parking lot when I arrive, and seeing her friendly face makes some of my nervousness ease. Ready for this? She asks as we walk toward the entrance. Probably not, I admit. But I'm here anyway. That's all that matters. The meeting room is set up with chairs in a loose circle, and there are maybe 15 people scattered around, ranging in age from what looks like early 20s to elderly. They're talking quietly among themselves, and the atmosphere is surprisingly normal, like a book club or a hobby group rather than the somber, tissue-heavy gathering I'd imagined. Sarah introduces me to the group leader, a woman named Patricia who lost her husband to a heart attack 2 years ago. She's warm but not pushy, explaining that newcomers are welcome to just listen for as long as they need to, that there's no pressure to share anything they're not ready to talk about. I end up sitting between Sarah and a man named Robert who lost his teenage son in a motorcycle accident. Robert is maybe 50, with graying hair and calloused hands that suggest he works with them for a living. He nods at me in a way that's welcoming without being invasive, and I appreciate that he doesn't ask questions about why I'm there. The meeting starts with Patricia sharing a brief update about her week, and then the conversation flows naturally around the circle. People talk about their struggles and their small victories, their setbacks and their moments of unexpected joy. A woman named Claire describes finally being able to go to her daughter's favorite restaurant without crying. A man named Jim talks about the anger he's been feeling lately and how he's learning to channel it into activism for the cause that took his partner. What strikes me most is how normal they all seem. They're not broken people drowning in perpetual sorrow. They're ordinary people learning to live with extraordinary loss, and they're doing it with humor and grace and mutual support. When it's Sarah's turn to speak, she talks about work, about a patient who beat the odds and went into remission, about how it reminded her that hope isn't about expecting perfect outcomes but about staying open to possibilities. I've been thinking a lot about Jennifer lately, she says. Not in the painful way that used to consume me, but in a grateful way. I'm grateful for the time we had, grateful for the love we shared, grateful that I knew her at all. And I'm starting to be grateful for the person her death helped me become, more compassionate, more present, more aware of how precious and fragile everything is. When she finishes, she glances at me with a small smile, and I realize she's been sharing her story as much for my benefit as for the group's. The conversation continues around the circle, and when it reaches me, I feel the familiar panic rising in my throat. But instead of the suffocating fear I expected, I find myself thinking about David's voice, his encouragement to take risks, to be brave even when it's hard. I'm Marcus, I say, my voice steadier than I thought it would be. I lost my partner 3 years ago to cancer. This is my first meeting, and I'm not really sure what to say, but I wanted to be here because I think I've been stuck. Not grieving, exactly, but not really living either. And today someone reminded me that maybe those don't have to be the same thing. There are nods around the circle, understanding expressions that don't pity or judge. Robert reaches over and squeezes my shoulder briefly, a gesture of solidarity that somehow conveys more support than a dozen well-meaning platitudes. After the meeting, several people approach me to welcome me and share their contact information. Claire gives me her number and tells me to call if I ever need to talk to someone who understands. Jim invites me to join a group of them who meet for coffee on Saturday mornings, just to hang out and be normal people together. Sarah and I walk out to the parking lot together, the December air crisp and clear for once, the stars visible between the clouds. How was that? She asks. Different than I expected, I say. Better. Less depressing, more, I don't know, hopeful. Like maybe it's possible to miss someone and still be okay. It is, she says. It takes practice, but it is. We stand by my car, and I realize I don't want this evening to end. Not because I'm interested in Sarah romantically, that still feels impossible, like a language I've forgotten how to speak, but because for the first time in years, I've spent an evening feeling connected to other people instead of isolated by my grief. Would you like to get coffee sometime? I ask. Not a date, I add quickly. I'm not. I don't think I'm ready for that. But maybe as friends. I feel like I could use more friends who understand. She smiles. I'd like that. There's a place called Stumptown on Division that makes excellent lattes. Are you free Saturday morning? Maybe after the group Jim mentioned. Yeah, that sounds good. As I drive home, I find myself thinking about the evening differently than I usually think about social interactions. Instead of analyzing everything I said wrong or worrying about how I came across, I'm thinking about the people I met and the stories they shared. About Robert's quiet strength and Claire's gradual healing and Jim's transformation of grief into purpose. And I'm thinking about Sarah, about her willingness to reach out to a stranger in a diner, about the way she talks about Jenny with love instead of just loss. There's something about her approach to grief that feels different from mine, not better or worse, just more integrated, like she's found a way to carry her love for her wife into her present life instead of letting it trap her in the past. That night, I do something I haven't done in months. I call my sister Rebecca in Seattle. We've been texting occasionally, surface level check-ins about work and weather, but I haven't had a real conversation with her since David's funeral. She picks up on the second ring, and I can hear the surprise in her voice when she realizes it's me. Marcus, is everything okay? Yeah, I'm fine. I went to a grief support group tonight, and it made me realize I've been shutting people out. I wanted to call and see how you're doing. There's a pause, and when she speaks again, her voice is softer. I'm glad you called. I've been worried about you, but I didn't want to push. How was the group? We talk for an hour, and it's the longest conversation we've had in years. She tells me about her job as a veterinarian, about the house she bought with her girlfriend Emma, about how she's been wanting to visit Portland but wasn't sure if I was ready for company. I tell her about the group, about Sarah, about the small steps I'm taking toward rejoining the world. David would be proud of you, she says toward the end of the call, echoing Sarah's words from earlier. Maybe, I say. I'm trying to think about what he'd want for me instead of just what I lost when he died. That's growth, Rebecca says. Real growth. And Marcus, I'd love to come visit soon, if you're up for it. Emma's never been to Portland, and we could do tourist stuff, eat at food trucks, visit Powell's books. I'd like that, I say, and realize I mean it. After we hang up, I sit in my apartment, our apartment, David's and mine, and look around with different eyes. The space still feels too big, but maybe that's because I've been trying to shrink myself to fit into the absence instead of figuring out how to grow into the space that remains. I walk over to the bookshelf where David's favorite books still sit exactly where he left them. For 3 years, I've treated them like a shrine, afraid to move them or touch them or integrate them with my own books. But tonight, I pull out his copy of The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, the book that made him laugh until he cried, even during chemo treatments when laughing hurt, and I sit in my reading chair and open it to the first page. Within minutes, I'm laughing at Douglas Adams' absurd humor, remembering David's voice as he read passages aloud, hearing his commentary and jokes and the way he could find profound meaning in the most ridiculous situations. But instead of the crushing sadness that usually accompanies these memories, I feel something warmer and more complex, gratitude that I got to share this book and this humor and this love with someone who appreciated it as much as I did. I read until late, and when I finally go to bed, I sleep better than I have in months. Saturday morning comes gray and drizzly, typical Portland weather that David used to say was perfect for contemplation and good coffee. I meet Jim's coffee group at a cafe in the Alberta Arts District, and it turns out to be a relaxed gathering of people from the support group plus a few of their friends. They're discussing everything from local politics to the latest Netflix series, and while grief is part of their shared experience, it's not the only thing they talk about. Jim himself is a carpenter who lost his partner of 15 years to AIDS-related complications. He's funny and irreverent, with a laugh that fills the whole cafe, and he treats grief like any other life experience, significant and formative, but not defining. He tells stories about his partner Derek with the same casual affection that people talk about living spouses, weaving memories into present moment conversations in a way that feels natural rather than forced. After coffee, Sarah and I walk through the neighborhood, looking at the murals and street art that Portland is famous for. The conversation flows easily, moving from serious topics about loss and healing to lighter discussions about work and books and the city we both love. Can I ask you something personal? Sarah says as we stop in front of a mural depicting a forest scene with hidden animals camouflaged throughout the trees. Sure. What's been the hardest part? Not just losing David, but the aftermath. The daily reality of grief. I think about it as we study the mural, searching for the hidden creatures in the painted foliage. The silence, I say finally. David and I used to talk constantly. About everything, about nothing. He was my sounding board for every decision, every worry, every stupid thought that popped into my head. When he died, I lost not just him but also the conversation that made sense of my life. I've been living in my head for 3 years, and it's gotten pretty echo-y in there. Sarah nods, pointing out a hidden owl in the branches. I understand that. Jenny and I had our own language, you know. Inside jokes and shared references and this whole way of communicating that didn't translate to anyone else. After she died, I felt like I was the only person left who spoke that language, and it made every conversation with other people feel shallow and foreign. How did you get past that? I'm not sure I did, completely. But I learned to build new languages with new people. Different kinds of intimacy, different ways of connecting. It doesn't replace what I had with Jenny, but it doesn't have to. It can just be something else that's also valuable. We find a bench in a small park and sit down, watching dog owners and joggers and families with young children navigate the Saturday afternoon bustle. I think about what Sarah said about building new languages, and I realize that's what's been happening in small ways, with the support group, with this conversation, even with the phone call to my sister. Can I tell you something? I say, of course. This is the first time in 3 years that I've had a conversation about David that didn't make me feel like I was drowning. Usually, when people ask about him or when I think about him for too long, it's like being pulled underwater. But talking with you feels different. Safer, somehow. Sarah turns to face me more directly. That's because I'm not trying to fix you or rush you through your grief. I'm just listening to you talk about someone you loved. There's a difference. Is it always going to hurt this much? The missing him part? Probably, yes. But it changes shape, gets less sharp around the edges. And eventually, if you let it, the love becomes bigger than the loss. At least, that's been my experience. A woman with a golden retriever passes by, and the dog strains toward us with enthusiastic tail wagging. The woman smiles apologetically and tries to pull him along, but Sarah laughs and gestures for her to let him approach. Hi there, beautiful, Sarah says, kneeling down to pet the dog. What's your name? This is Buster, the woman says. He thinks everyone needs to be his friend. Smart dog, Sarah replies, scratching behind Buster's ears. The world could use more of that philosophy. After the woman and Buster continue their walk, Sarah stays crouched at eye level with the bench where I'm sitting. Marcus, I want to ask you something, and I want you to really think about your answer. If David could see you right now, in this moment, sitting in this park having this conversation, how do you think he'd feel? I close my eyes and try to imagine David's perspective, try to channel his voice and his values and his love for me. The answer comes immediately, with a clarity that surprises me. He'd be relieved, I say. And probably a little proud. David always worried that I was too much of a loner, that I didn't have enough close friendships outside of our relationship. He used to say I needed to diversify my emotional portfolio. I smile at the memory. He was an economics major before he switched to social work, so he always talked about feelings in financial terms. Sounds like he was smart about people. He was smart about everything, including knowing that I'd probably hibernate after he died. The last thing he said to me, in the hospital, was, "Don't disappear, Marcus. The world needs your weird sense of humor and your terrible cooking and your big heart. Don't disappear." Sarah sits back down on the bench, her expression thoughtful. And yet you kind of did disappear, didn't you? Yeah, I did. I take a deep breath, feeling something shift in my chest. But maybe I'm starting to reappear. We sit in comfortable silence for a while, watching the world go by. I realize that this is what I've been missing, not just companionship, but the specific kind of companionship that comes from shared understanding. Sarah doesn't need me to explain why grief makes simple social interactions feel impossibly complex, or why some days getting dressed feels like a major accomplishment. She just knows. Would you like to get dinner sometime? I ask as we start walking back toward our cars. As friends, I add again, because I need her to understand that I'm not ready for anything romantic, might never be ready for that again. I'd love to, she says. There's a Vietnamese place on Hawthorne that makes incredible pho. Perfect for rainy Portland evenings. That sounds perfect. Over the next few weeks, Sarah and I fall into an easy friendship. We text regularly, not constantly, but enough to maintain connection. She shares stories from the hospital, the victories and defeats that come with pediatric oncology. I tell her about my work, about the clients who want their logos to pop more, and the satisfaction of creating something beautiful and functional. We have dinner at the Vietnamese restaurant, where Sarah demonstrates proper pho technique and tells me stories about her residency that make me laugh until my sides hurt. We go to a grief support group meeting together, where I share more of my story and listen to others share theirs. We attend a movie at the Clinton Street Theater, a quirky Portland institution where they serve pizza and beer during screenings. Slowly, I begin to reconnect with other parts of my life that I'd abandoned. I accept a project from a longtime client I'd been putting off, designing a complete brand identity for a new nonprofit that provides art therapy for trauma survivors. The work feels meaningful in a way my projects haven't in years, and I find myself putting in extra hours not because I have to but because I want to. I have coffee with my former coworker Lisa, who's been trying to get together for months. She tells me about her new job at a design firm downtown, about her recent engagement, about the friends we used to share who ask about me sometimes. It's awkward at first. I've been out of practice with normal social conversation, but Lisa is patient and doesn't seem to mind filling the silences while I remember how to participate in friendship. I even start cooking again, real meals with actual ingredients rather than the string of takeout and frozen dinners that have sustained me for years. I'm not good at it. David was always the better cook, but there's something meditative about chopping vegetables and stirring sauces and creating something nourishing with my own hands. One evening in late January, I'm making pasta when my phone rings. It's Sarah, and she sounds tired in a way that goes beyond just physical exhaustion. Hey, she says when I answer. Are you busy? Just making dinner. What's up? You sound wiped out. I lost a patient today. 7-year-old girl named Maya. She'd been fighting for 2 years, and we thought she was beating it, but the cancer came back aggressive. She died this afternoon with her parents holding her hands. My chest tightens with sympathy. Sarah, I'm so sorry. That's awful. It's part of the job, I know that. But Maya was special. She was an artist, always drawing pictures for the nurses and doctors. Last week she gave me a drawing of us together in her hospital room, with a rainbow over our heads. I have it taped to my computer monitor. I can hear her crying softly, and I want to reach through the phone and somehow offer comfort. Where are you right now? In my car, outside the hospital. I should go home, but I don't want to be alone with this feeling. Come over, I say without hesitation. I have too much pasta anyway, and we can talk or not talk or just sit together. Whatever you need. Are you sure? I'm pretty much a mess right now. I'm sure. You've been there for me plenty of times when I was a mess. That's what friends do. She arrives 20 minutes later, still in her scrubs, her eyes red from crying. I hug her when she comes through the door, the first time we've hugged, I realize, despite weeks of friendship, and she holds on tightly for a long moment before pulling back. Sorry, she says. I'm not usually this emotional at work, but Maya just got to me. Don't apologize. Feeling things deeply isn't a weakness, especially in your line of work. It means you care. We eat dinner mostly in silence, but it's a comfortable silence punctuated by occasional conversation about mundane things, the weather, a funny story from my workday, her plans for the weekend. After we finish eating, we move to the couch, and Sarah curls up in the corner with a mug of tea, looking younger and more vulnerable than I've seen her. Can I ask you something? She says after a while. Always. How do you think David handled it when his patients didn't make it? The kids in foster care who got sent back to bad situations, are aged out of the system without finding permanent families. I consider the question, remembering conversations David and I had during his years as a social worker. He said he learned to measure success differently. That sometimes success wasn't saving everyone, but making sure each person knew someone cared about them, even if it was just for a short time. He said the caring itself mattered, even when it couldn't change the outcome. Sarah nods, tears starting again. Maya knew she was loved. Her parents were amazing, never left her side. The whole nursing staff adored her. But it still feels like we failed her somehow. You didn't fail her, I say firmly. You gave her 2 extra years of life, 2 years where she could draw pictures and make people smile and be a kid. That's not failure. That's a gift. I know you're right, intellectually. But it still hurts. It should hurt. David used to say that the day he stopped feeling the pain of losing someone was the day he should find a different job. The pain means you're human. We sit together on the couch, both of us lost in our own thoughts about love and loss and the terrible, beautiful complexity of caring about people in a world where everyone eventually dies. But somehow, sharing the silence makes it more bearable. Thank you, Sarah says as she's getting ready to leave. For dinner, for listening, for letting me fall apart in your living room. Thank you for trusting me with your falling apart. It means a lot that you called. After she leaves, I clean up the dinner dishes and think about how the evening felt different from our usual interactions. More intimate, somehow, but not in a romantic way. In the way of 2 people who've learned to trust each other with their broken places, who can offer comfort without trying to fix everything. I realize that somewhere in the past few weeks, Sarah has become more than just a fellow grief traveler or a supportive friend. She's become someone I genuinely care about, someone whose pain matters to me in a personal way. It's the first time since David died that I've felt that kind of emotional investment in another person's well-being. The realization is both comforting and terrifying. February slides into March, and my friendship with Sarah continues to deepen. We develop routines and inside jokes, shared references and comfortable silences. She introduces me to her friend Kate, a nurse practitioner who also lost her spouse and who has a dry sense of humor that reminds me of David. Kate and I hit it off immediately, bonding over our shared experience of well-meaning people who try to set up widowed people as if grief were simply a problem to be solved with the right romantic match. Everyone thinks we should date each other, Kate tells me over coffee one Saturday morning. 2 single people of approximately the same age who've both lost partners. Obviously we're perfect for each other. Obviously, I agree sarcastically. Never mind that we have completely different interests and you're gay. Minor details, Kate says with a grin. Though I did tell my sister that if you were a woman, I'd probably ask you out. You're funny and kind and you don't try to fix people. Those are rare qualities. The compliment surprises me with its warmth. I've become so used to thinking of myself as fundamentally broken that it's startling to hear someone describe me in positive terms. Through Kate and Sarah, I meet other people who've learned to navigate loss without being defined by it. There's Michael, a widowed father of 2 who started a nonprofit providing grief support for children after his wife died of breast cancer. There's Rosa, whose teenage son was killed by a drunk driver and who now speaks at high schools about the dangers of impaired driving. There's Tom and Jerry, yes, like the cartoon, a couple who lost their adopted daughter to a rare genetic disease and who now volunteer with hospice families. These people become a chosen family of sorts, a group that understands that grief doesn't follow a timeline and that healing doesn't mean forgetting. We have potluck dinners and game nights and group outings to movies and concerts. We celebrate birthdays and holidays together, creating new traditions that honor our losses while embracing our continuing lives. In April, Sarah gets news that one of her long-term patients, a teenager named Alex who's been fighting lymphoma for 3 years, is finally in complete remission. The celebration party at the hospital includes Alex's extended family, the medical team, and several other patients who look up to Alex as a success story. Sarah invites me to come, and I find myself in the surreal but wonderful position of celebrating life in the same building where David died. This is what keeps me going, Sarah tells me as we watch Alex blow out candles on a cake decorated with superhero figures. Moments like this, when the fight is worth it. I think about David, about how much he would have loved this scene. He was always drawn to celebrations of resilience and hope, always ready to cheer for the underdog. I can almost hear his voice, commenting on Alex's obvious relief and joy, making some joke about hospital cake that would make everyone laugh. But instead of the usual stab of grief that comes with these imagined conversations, I feel something warmer, gratitude that David taught me to appreciate these moments, to notice the small victories that make life meaningful. He would have loved this, I tell Sarah, and she doesn't have to ask who I mean. I bet Alex would have loved David too. He has a way of connecting with kids who've been through trauma. Had, I correct gently, though not with the sharp pain that used to accompany the past tense. Has, Sarah says firmly. That part of him lives in you. In the way you listen to people, the way you notice details that matter. Some things don't die when someone's body does. Her words echo something she said months ago in the diner, but now they land differently. Then, they felt like a kind platitude meant to comfort. Now, they feel like observable truth. That night, I call Rebecca to tell her about the party, about Sarah's work, about the gradual rebuilding of my social life. She listens with the satisfaction of someone who's been waiting years for good news. I'm proud of you, she says. Not just for getting better, but for getting better in your own way, on your own timeline. I know people have been pushing you to move on, or whatever, but what you're doing seems healthier. You're not leaving David behind. You're bringing the best parts of him with you into whatever comes next. I think that's what healing actually looks like, I say. Not forgetting or replacing, but integrating. Making room for both the grief and the growth. When can Emma and I come visit? We've been planning a Portland trip for months, and now that you're actually answering your phone and socializing with humans, it seems like good timing. We set a date for early May, and I find myself genuinely excited about showing them around the city, introducing them to Sarah and my other friends, sharing the life I've been rebuilding. In late April, something shifts between Sarah and me, though it takes me a while to recognize what's happening. We're at the Saturday morning coffee group, listening to Jim tell a story about a client who wanted him to build a treehouse that would blend seamlessly with the natural environment, while also including Wi-Fi and a wine fridge. Everyone is laughing at his description of trying to explain the contradictions involved, when I catch Sarah watching me with an expression I haven't seen before. It's not the look of a friend enjoying a shared joke. It's softer, more personal, tinged with something that might be longing. When our eyes meet, she doesn't look away immediately like she usually does. Instead, she holds my gaze for a long moment, and I feel something flutter in my chest that I haven't felt in years. The realization hits me like a physical blow. I'm attracted to Sarah. Not just as a friend, not just as someone who understands my grief, but as a woman. As a potential romantic partner. The thought terrifies me. I spend the rest of the morning hyper-aware of her presence, noticing details I've been unconsciously absorbing for months. The way she tucks her hair behind her ear when she's thinking, the small scar on her chin from a childhood accident, the way she laughs with her whole body when something genuinely amuses her. After coffee, we walk through the neighborhood like we usually do, but the conversation feels different, charged with an undercurrent I don't know how to navigate. Marcus, Sarah says as we stop in front of a bookstore. Window display, can I ask you something kind of personal? My heart rate speeds up. Sure. Do you ever think about dating again? I know you said you weren't ready when we first met, but that was months ago. Has that changed at all? The question hangs between us, loaded with implications I'm not sure I'm ready to examine. I don't know, I say honestly. The idea still feels impossible most of the time. Like I wouldn't know how to be in a relationship that wasn't with David. She nods, but I can see something flicker across her face. Disappointment, maybe, or resignation. That makes sense. Some people are only meant to love once, I think. There's nothing wrong with that. What about you? I ask, though I'm not sure I want to hear the answer. Do you think about dating? She's quiet for a long moment, studying the books in the window display. Sometimes. More lately, actually. I've been thinking that maybe I'm ready to try letting someone else get close to me. It wouldn't be the same as what I had with Jenny, but it could be something good in its own way. The words feel like both an invitation and a gentle challenge. I want to ask if she has someone specific in mind, want to tell her about the flutter in my chest and the way I've been noticing her differently. But I also want to run back to my apartment and hide under the covers until these confusing feelings go away. Instead, I say, I think you'd be an amazing partner for the right person. You're kind and smart and you understand things that most people don't. Someone would be lucky to have you. It's not exactly a declaration of romantic interest, but it's not entirely platonic either. Sarah looks at me with that same soft expression from earlier, and for a moment I think she might say something that will change everything between us. Instead, she smiles and says, "Thank you. That means a lot, coming from you." We finish our walk in comfortable silence, but I can feel something has shifted. A door has been opened, even if neither of us is ready to walk through it yet. That evening, I sit in my apartment trying to make sense of what I'm feeling. For 3 years, the idea of romantic love has felt not just impossible but somehow disloyal to David's memory. I've worn my grief like armor, protecting myself from the vulnerability that comes with caring about someone in that particular way. But now, thinking about Sarah, I realize that my feelings for her don't diminish what I had with David. They exist in a different space entirely, growing from the person I've become since his death rather than the person I was before it. I pull out my laptop and start writing, not for a client, but for myself. It starts as a letter to David, but becomes something larger, a meditation on love and loss and the possibility of beginning again without erasing what came before. I write about Sarah, about her kindness and her strength and the way she makes me want to be more engaged with the world. I write about the fear that loving someone new means betraying David's memory, and about the gradual realization that love might not be a finite resource that gets used up when someone dies. I write about the difference between moving on and moving forward, about the way healing doesn't erase the past but integrates it into a larger story. By the time I finish, it's nearly midnight, and I've written almost 3,000 words. I save the document and close the laptop, feeling lighter somehow, like I've been carrying a weight I didn't realize was there. The next morning, I do something that surprises me. I call Sarah and ask if she wants to have dinner that week. Not as part of a group, not as a casual friend hangout, but just the two of us. Like a date, she asks, and I can hear the careful hope in her voice. Maybe, I say. I'm not sure what I'm ready for exactly, but I'd like to find out. If you're interested. I'm interested, she says softly. Very interested. We make plans for Friday evening at a small Italian restaurant in the Pearl District that neither of us has been to before, neutral territory where we can figure out what this new dynamic between us might look like. The week passes slowly, and I find myself alternating between excitement and panic. I clean my apartment more thoroughly than it's been cleaned in years. I buy new clothes, nothing dramatic, just a shirt that fits better than my usual oversized options. I get a haircut for the first time in months. I also spend a lot of time thinking about David, about what he would want for me. In my heart, I know he'd be happy that I'm taking this risk, that I'm allowing myself to be vulnerable again. David always believed that love was meant to be shared generously, not hoarded or rationed, but knowing what David would want and feeling ready to act on it are two different things. Friday arrives gray and drizzly, typical Portland spring weather. I spend the afternoon working on a logo design, grateful for the distraction but unable to fully concentrate. At 5 o'clock, I give up pretending to be productive and start getting ready for dinner. I arrive at the restaurant 15 minutes early and spend the time sitting in my car, watching people walk by on the sidewalk and trying to calm my nerves. When I see Sarah approaching, my heart does something complicated in my chest. She's wearing a dress I haven't seen before, deep blue with a pattern of small flowers, something that manages to be both elegant and understated. Her hair is down instead of pulled back, and she's wearing lipstick that brings out the warmth in her brown eyes. She looks beautiful, but more importantly, she looks like herself, confident and kind and real. Hi, she says when I meet her at the restaurant door, and there's a slight nervousness in her voice that matches my own. Hi yourself, I reply. You look beautiful. She smiles, a genuine expression that eases some of my anxiety. Thank you. You clean up pretty well yourself. Inside, the restaurant is warm and dimly lit, with exposed brick walls and candles on every table. We're seated in a corner booth that feels intimate without being claustrophobic, and for the first few minutes we stick to safe topics: work, the weather, mutual friends from the support group. But gradually, the conversation becomes more personal. Sarah tells me about her childhood in North Carolina, about medical school and the moment she decided to specialize in pediatric oncology. I share stories about growing up in Portland, about art school and the path that led me to graphic design. We talk about our partners too, but in a different way than we have before. Instead of grief being the central focus, we share the love stories that came before the loss. How Sarah and Jenny met at a bookstore where Jenny was doing a poetry reading, how David and I bonded over a shared love of terrible science fiction movies during a college film class. Jenny would have liked you, Sarah says over dessert, a tiramisu we're sharing. She always said I needed friends who could make me laugh when I was taking myself too seriously. David would have liked you too, I reply. He had a thing for strong women who weren't afraid to call people on their bullshit. He would have said you were good for me. The conversation continues to flow easily, and by the time we finish dinner, some of my nervousness has faded. This feels natural, comfortable in the way the best first dates do, like getting to know someone you already like but from a different angle. We walk slowly back toward our cars, neither of us seeming eager to end the evening. The rain has stopped, and the streets shine with reflected light from neon signs and street lamps. Thank you for tonight, Sarah says when we reach her car. It was really nice. Different from hanging out as friends, but good different. I thought so too, I say, and then, before I can overthink it, I step closer and kiss her softly. It's brief and gentle, more of a question than a statement, and when I pull back, Sarah is smiling. I was hoping you'd do that, she admits. I was hoping I'd have the courage to. We stand there for a moment, close enough that I can smell her perfume and see the flecks of gold in her brown eyes. I feel something I haven't felt in years, the particular vulnerability that comes with new romantic possibility, the mixture of excitement and terror that accompanies opening your heart to someone. Would you like to do this again? I ask. Yes, she says immediately. Definitely yes. I kiss her again, longer this time, and feel something inside me unclenching, some tightly held fear beginning to loosen its grip. When I drive home, I'm smiling in a way that feels foreign but wonderful. For the first time in 3 years, I'm looking forward to something romantic, anticipating the next conversation and the next kiss and whatever might develop between us. That night, I don't dream about David for the first time in months. Instead, I dream about possibilities, about futures I hadn't allowed myself to imagine. I wake up feeling rested and hopeful and slightly amazed at my own capacity for joy. The relationship develops slowly, carefully, both of us mindful of the tender places that still need protection. We go on more dates, to movies and museums and long walks through Forest Park. We cook dinner together at my apartment, and Sarah shares stories about her patients while I work on design projects at the kitchen table. Physical intimacy comes gradually too. Hand-holding during movies, longer kisses goodnight, eventually Sarah falling asleep on my couch during a Netflix marathon and waking up in my arms. Each step feels like a small miracle, evidence that my capacity for love didn't die with David. We talk about our concerns too, about whether we're ready for this, about how to honor our past relationships while building something new, about the fear that we're somehow betraying Jenny and David by moving forward. But these conversations happen in the context of growing trust and affection, making them feel less like obstacles and more like part of the natural process of two careful people learning to be vulnerable with each other. In early May, when Rebecca and Emma come to visit, I introduce them to Sarah over brunch at a cafe in the Pearl District. I'm nervous about how they'll get along, but my worries prove unfounded. Rebecca and Sarah connect immediately over their shared experience of working in helping professions, and Emma, who teaches high school English, bonds with Sarah over their mutual love of contemporary fiction. I like her, Rebecca tells me privately while Sarah and Emma are in the restroom. She's good for you, but more importantly, you're good for her too. It's not one-sided, not her rescuing you from grief. You're both bringing something valuable to this relationship. Her observation stays with me because it captures something important about what Sarah and I have built together. Unlike my relationship with David, which began when we were both young and relatively unformed, this relationship is between two people who've been shaped by significant loss and who've done the work to rebuild themselves. We're not trying to complete each other or fill empty spaces. We're choosing to share lives that feel full on their own. That evening, the four of us go to a Timbers soccer game, something David and I used to do regularly. I'm worried it might be painful, being there with someone else, but instead it feels like a natural continuation of something David loved. Sarah cheers enthusiastically despite knowing nothing about soccer, and Rebecca and Emma get caught up in the crowd energy, and by halftime we're all hoarse from shouting. David would have loved this, I tell Sarah during a quiet moment in the second half. I think so too, she agrees. And I think he'd be happy that you're still doing things he enjoyed, just with new people to share them with. The game goes to overtime, and when the Timbers finally win on a penalty kick, Sarah hugs me with the uninhibited joy of someone who's genuinely excited about a good outcome, even if she doesn't fully understand the sport. In that moment, I realize I'm completely in love with her, not as a replacement for David, not as a way to avoid grief, but as a genuine new beginning built on its own foundation. Later that night, after Rebecca and Emma have gone back to their hotel, Sarah and I sit on my balcony sharing a bottle of wine and talking about the evening. Can I tell you something? I say, feeling brave from the wine and the soccer victory and the way Sarah's hand feels in mine. Always. I love you. The words hang in the air between us, simple and complicated at the same time. Sarah is quiet for a long moment, and I start to worry that I've moved too fast, said too much. Then she turns to face me fully, her eyes bright in the light from the apartment. I love you too, she says. I have for weeks, but I wasn't sure if it was okay to say it. If we were both ready for it. Are we ready for it? I don't know, she admits. But I know I don't want to let fear keep me from saying what's true. I love you, Marcus. Not because you remind me of Jenny, not because you help me forget her, but because you're you. Because you make me laugh and you listen when I talk about work and you notice things that matter. Because you've seen me at my worst and you still want to be here. I kiss her then, tasting wine and promise and the particular sweetness that comes with mutual declaration. When we break apart, I realize I'm crying, not from sadness, but from relief and joy and the overwhelming gratitude of someone who thought he might never feel this way again. What happens now? I ask. Now we figure it out as we go, Sarah says. We keep talking to each other, keep being honest about what we need and what we're afraid of. We honor the people we lost while building something that's ours. I like that plan. Good, she says, settling more comfortably against my side. Because I think we're going to be really good at this, once we get the hang of it. Looking back now, almost a year later, I can see that Sarah was right. We are good at this careful, intentional love built on the foundation of shared loss and mutual understanding. It's not the same as what I had with David, and it's not trying to be. It's something entirely new, shaped by who we've become through grief and growth and the choice to remain open to possibility. We still go to the support group sometimes, not because we need it as much as we used to, but because we want to give back to people who are where we once were. We talk about David and Jenny regularly, sharing memories and including them in our present in ways that feel natural rather than forced. Sarah moved in with me 6 months ago, bringing her books and her coffee maker and a sense of home that I thought I'd lost forever. We're talking about marriage, not rushing toward it, but acknowledging it as a future we both want to grow into. Sometimes people ask how I knew I was ready to love again, as if there were some moment of clear revelation, some internal switch that flipped from off to on. The truth is messier. And more gradual than that. I didn't wake up one morning suddenly healed from grief and ready for new love. Instead, I learned to carry my love for David alongside my love for Sarah, to let both feelings exist without diminishing each other. The apartment still has photos of David, and Sarah's bookshelf still holds the books Jenny gave her. We've added new photos too, pictures of us together, images from trips we've taken, moments from the life we're building together. The past and present coexist here, integrated rather than competing. This morning, which happens to be the 4th anniversary of David's death, I woke up to Sarah making coffee in the kitchen. She kissed me good morning and asked if I wanted to go to the cemetery later, not because she thinks I should but because she knows it's part of how I honor his memory. Would you come with me? I asked, and she said yes without hesitation. We'll go together this afternoon, Sarah and I, to visit David's grave. I'll tell him about the life I've built, about Sarah and our friends and the work I'm doing that feels meaningful again. I'll thank him for loving me well enough that I learned how to love again, for showing me that grief and joy can coexist, that the heart is more expansive than I ever imagined, and then we'll go home together, Sarah and I, to the life we've chosen and the love we've built and the future we're creating one careful, intentional day at a time. Because that's what healing looks like, I've learned. Not the absence of grief, but the presence of love that's bigger than loss. Not moving on from the past, but moving forward with it, carrying the best of what was into whatever comes next. It's not the story I thought I'd be living 4 years ago, but it's the story I'm grateful to be writing now.